Good afternoon. Welcome to the Arizona Rural Human Services Network, featuring who, what, where, when, how, and why. And today my guests are Dr. John Arnold, CEO and founder of Project PEP, which is Portable Practical Educational Program. Preparation. Pardon me. I did the same thing last week with Danny. And to his left is Jim Watson, who is the AFL-CIO Labor Liaison between the Southern Arizona Central Labor Council and the United Way of Greater Tucson. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Billy.
We have some very important information we need to put out to our viewers regarding child labor. On May 6th, the International Labor Organization and the AFL-CIO had presented a workshop, press conference, of which Jimbo was a speaker, and I call him Jimbo. His name is James Watson. I call him Jimbo. And I got a lot of feedback. I could not be there, and I got a lot of feedback that he gave an excellent speech. And Dr. Arnold had people from Project PEP there, and they are aligning with this cause, and it is a good one. Gentlemen, I'm going to turn the show over to you. I would like you to explain exactly what this is. We'll start with you, Jim. Tell our viewers what this is, what it's about, and how it got started.
Okay, basically this is a march against child labor around the 5 continents across the globe. It's sponsored by, as you stated, the International Labor Organization. The U.S. participating organizations are the AFL-CIO, and I'll just name a few. American Federation of Teachers, Association of Farm Worker Opportunity Programs, which is an arm of the farm workers here in the States, Child Labor Coalition, United Methodist Church, and there's many, many others. And as we go through our presentation, we'll explain who all took part of it here in Tucson. Basically what the challenge is to bring locally the issue of child labor, not only across the globe, but how it relates to us here in our community. A lot of folks don't realize that in our community alone, it's estimated that there's over 5 million children in our country that are working under child labor, specifically farm workers, and specifically in sweatshops across the country. We were very fortunate to have the delegation come into Tucson on May 6th. They started out here in LA. I believe they went through Mexicali, and Dr. Arnold's a part of that. And from there, I'll let him take
Yuma.
it. Yuma. What we did is we basically had a press conference, which Dr. Arnold was the host. Very gracious that he did that for us. And we tried to explain what is going on, what our country's views are on it, and what we can do as concerned citizens to change this very ill wrong that's going on in our society today.
Well, Dr. Arnold, I would like to apologize. I didn't realize you were the driving force of this.
Well, I don't think I was really anything. Sometimes we're a little bit like the thunder behind the throne, but really it's the people, the children that had the show. And as Jim was speaking, I was looking at the mission of the Global March, and I'd just like to read the paragraph so it's kind of clear to everybody what we're talking about. But it's the Global March Against Child Labor, and the mission is to mobilize worldwide efforts to protect and promote the rights of all children, especially the right to receive a free, meaningful education and to be free from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be damaging to the child's physical, mental, spiritual, moral, and social development. And one of the things that we're very concerned about is there's over 200,000 migrant seasonal farm worker children, some as young as 4 years of age, working in the fields. And that's one of the reasons we went to Calexico, California, and into the Yuma areas to point out, because that's where most of our winter vegetables come from. Not that there's a tremendous problem there, but that agriculture is a part of our economy here and that we have to be vigilant. And it was gratifying to see in the Yuma area, a number of the growers have been very vigilant, and I think mainly because Cesar Chavez was from that area, and there was a very strong commitment towards the farm workers' better way of life, that there had been some good education done there. So we found very little, if any, of that kind of abuse. But nationwide, the United States has over 200,000 young children working in the fields, sometimes 12, 15 hours a day. They don't have any real sanitation facilities. And in our area, you know, it's very life-threatening because it's up to 115 degrees. The field temperatures even rise beyond that. And so that's been a great concern to us here in the Southwest and across the country. Now, the other thing about migrant seasonal farm workers that they have the highest infant mortality rate in the nation, and the average life expectancy for a farm worker is 47 years of age. And when we consider these people are the ones that put the food on our table, it's very important for us to realize that we have to start from the youngest in the family and working with them up through the oldest. And in our own agency, we have a commitment to working with the younger children, working through charter schools with the middle and teenage children, and with the farm workers through employment and training programs. But this global march in one of our affiliate organizations, the Association of Farm Worker Opportunities, and Diane Mall was very effective in being a very large part of this. I kind of came in when they got to Yuma. They had already, as Jimbo said, been to Los Angeles, and it was interesting. I got there around 7 o'clock, and the pastor at the Methodist church there in Yuma, where we were staying, we all had sleeping bags, and the kids were there. And we got this desperate call from Mexicali that one of the young men from South Africa, who was part of the leg from Brazil, had gotten stranded on the other side of the line, and they couldn't get him across to Tijuana, so they were going to deliver him around midnight to Mexicali. So the young man that was driving with us, we drove back through the desert there around 11 o'clock, and we waited around a long time. This young man didn't show up, but we went across the border a few times, and we got to talk to the border guard. So finally, we were kind of like sleeping in the van right at the van entrance to the port of entry, and a couple of the marshals came running out. We found your man. So that was a great relief, and he was in time for the press conference there in Yuma. We had a number of kids from the Somerton Pep Tech Charter High School that came. Many of them had worked in the fields themselves when they were younger, and some of the field workers from the employment training staff as well. So it was a wonderful opportunity to just see these young people's testimonials. There was a young man from India who is probably 10, 11 years old. He had been tortured. He had been working in a rug factory. His parents had been told that if he would go to to work for this factory by the masters, as they'd call them, the employers, that he would receive a good education, he received good food and clothing. And when he got there, he got that for about 2 days. He got some good food. And then he was put into this very rigorous 10, 12-hour a day, meticulous work, working in making carpets. And when he was slow, they would actually beat these kids. There was some situations of some real violent acts. And finally, the Worldwide Organization on Global Against Child Labor in India got the police to raid this particular factory, and this young man was found in the fields hiding. And they took him back, and now he's gotten involved in wanting to do something for other children. So he was part of the march, and every one of the young people that were there had a story. There was a young man from South Africa, another from Zambia, and another young lady from India, and another young lady that I met from Manila. All of them had the stories. They were young children. And I got to thinking as we were coming to Tucson, you know, these kids are going to be going all across the country from LA and going all the way to Washington, D.C. on the 27th, and then they're going to end up in Switzerland, yes, Geneva, at the major labor conference. So we thought we needed to do something special when they got here, so we took them to Old Tucson. We went out through Gates Pass. They'd never seen a saguaro cactus, so we got to hike around on the rocks, and we went down and we rode the stagecoach and the train out there, and took the kids into the Indian storytelling and the gunfight. And you know, they are children, and we wanted them to enjoy some of the scenery that was there. But that's when it came back to the labor conference. Jimbo had his daughter there. She was listening to what was happening. Our children need to know in this country what is happening. But most of all, adults need to know that the United States and I think North Korea are only one or two of the only nations that have not signed the international agreement against child labor. And the reason is because our labor laws for field workers is so antiquated that we could not ratify that particular United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, because our laws do not protect our children in the fields. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted to be part of this, is to emphasize the problems that children have.
Jim, now you being the labor liaison with the AFL-CIO, do you see something forthcoming in the near future that will get the United States to change that policy and sign on to that?
Yeah, hopefully what will happen across the community, each citizen will get involved and they'll call their congressman, they'll call their state reps, and they'll let them know that this is an important issue for them and they would like to see this stop not only in our country but across the globe. John was saying about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it's real basic rights. It's an agreement between the nations that establish a comprehensive set of goals for individual nations to achieve on behalf of their children. And I'll read off in general what it really calls for. It calls for protection of hazardous employment and exploitation, protection from violence, abuse, and abduction, adequate nutrition, free compulsory primary education, which is really a key, adequate health care, equal treatment regardless of gender, race, or cultural background, the right to express their opinions and freedom on any thought and matters affecting them, and self-exposure, safe exposure, and the access to leisure, play, culture, and art. Basically, we're asking to have our country sign on to things that the majority of our children in the industrial side of our country already have a right to. My child has a right to free public education. My child has a right to health care if she needs it. If my child's so sick that I don't have health care, I can go to the county hospital and they will make sure that she's taken care of. These children don't have that right. Many of their farm workers don't have that right. And that's because there are some loopholes in the Fair Labor Standards Act, as John was talking about earlier. This is the fastest growing treaty, international treaty, in the history of the civilized world. 191 nations have signed on. Ours is one of the few that hasn't signed on to it. So
Do you know why? Is there any explanation?
Could I
What
share
what I'm getting at here is, we see, and I'll term our government as Big Brother. We see them laying down all these laws that we as parents have to follow to care for our children, which is pretty much everything you've just read, but yet they're not signing off on something like this? I don't understand that.
One of the reasons is that they made an announcement during the Yuma press conference that the Justice Department had just sent out 57 indictments against labor contractors in the southern part of the United States that were using young children as prostitutes in the labor camps. And that's one of the reasons there's not the enforcement. Sometimes there's laws on the books that the states may have that the feds may not have, and some are more stringent than others. But the whole problem comes down to enforcement. Even with a short-handled hoe, when we got that outlawed here in Arizona, there was nobody to enforce it once the laws were in. They had 2 or 3 inspectors going out. And same way with pesticide safety protection for the children in the fields. Sometimes there's no re-entry after the planes go over and spray the fields. So the children are there, or the farm labor camps, many times they don't turn off the nozzle when they go over the living areas of these people. So it is a concern to those in the farm labor and the labor movement in general, is that we've got laws on the book and basic protections, but even when they're there, there's not the enforcement.
Now, where you go from here? You've had this conference. You've had a good turnout. You've got a lot of exposure. Where does it go from here?
Well, there's a few things that we can do as concerned citizens, not only as organized labor, but as concerned citizens and as church groups and anything across. It's going to take every single concerned citizen. We need to get past our singular groups and make a coalition of concerned citizens and try to raise some exposure. One of the things that, like I said, you could do a letter writing campaign to your U.S. Senator in support of the CRC. You can work with your local church, your schools, your community groups to create grassroots supports. And and they can write letters. You know, just because they're out of our area of the country, we can still talk about this. And hopefully we planted the seed, and it'll go out in the community, and we'll be able to get some good out of this. If you bear with me, if Dr. Arnold wants to pick up on that, I'll find some information.
Yeah, one of the things, well, there were 7 points that the march wanted to do, and let me just read them. They're very brief, but the number one priority was to raise the awareness about the child labor situation, which this is what these kind of press efforts do. Secondly, urge states to ratify and enforce existing conventions and laws on child labor and education, which is another very important aspect. The third thing stated by this march, by the way, the Robert F. Kennedy Foundation was one of the other groups behind funding this, along with others. But the third thing was mobilize the maximum possible national and international resources to support education for all children. Number 4 was to mobilize public opinion and action against the broader injustices contributing to child labor, which, you know, those things have, each of these have a lot of ramifications. And then demand the immediate elimination of most exploitive forms of child labor, and I think that's something that all of us are very concerned about. 6, promote positive actions by employers and consumers. Consumers have a lot to say in what goes on. Ensure the proper rehabilitation and reintegration of child laborers, which is a very important part of this. And one of the strategies in third world countries is that as the children move out of the labor, that they hire their parents. This way there's no economic loss to any particular family. So a lot of the strategies that come out in this march that they have done in these press conferences certainly go a long way to giving us a blueprint. And maybe, Jimbo, you'd like to share a little more on that.
Yeah, and to pick up on being a responsible commuter or a consumer, you can ask a retailer, can you guarantee that the product you're selling is manufactured under decent working conditions without child labor? And I can guarantee you that the folks working behind that sales counter is not going to know. But what that'll do is that'll raise awareness in them. You can ask if there's any guidelines concerning labor's conditions in facilities that the products that they sell, that they're manufactured in a child labor-free environment, whether it be manufactured in the Philippines or manufactured in Indochina. These are the things that are help raise awareness. And typically the folks that really understand this very horrific problem are the folks that up at the top of the CEO ladder. But if we get the folks that are working for these folks and say, look, we need to try to do something, that's when this movement will start to pick up. Some of the bills that are currently being talked about up on the Hill up in D.C. is the Child Labor-Free Consumer Information Act of '97. The Senate bill is 554. The House bill is 1301. Its lead sponsors are Senator Tom Harkin out of Iowa and Representative George Miller out of California. And what this basically does, it establishes a voluntary labeling system for apparel and sporting goods made without abusive and exploitive child labor. It's such an issue now where the average consumer, if they knew that the soccer ball that they're buying was made in India by forced child labor, I don't think they'd buy it. But if we raise enough awareness and it has that label on it, then we believe not only will it increase the sales for that particular industry, but it'll obviously stop child labor where we need to stop it, in the factory. There's Child Labor Deterrent Act. Once again, it's sponsored by Senator Harkin and Representative Barry Frank. The Senate bill is 332. The House bill is 1328. This bill prohibits the importation and manufacture of mine goods that are produced by children under the age of 15. It would also require the development and maintenance of a list of foreign industries that use child labor. Companies violating the prohibition against importing these products would be subject to stiff penalties, which once again stops it at the base. The other bill they're asking us to get involved with is the Young American Workers Bill of Rights. The lead sponsor on that is Representative Tom Lantos out of California. This bill would set minimum standards for protecting children in the workforce. It would establish criminal sanctions for willful violations of child labor laws that result in the death of a child or serious bodily injury to a child. It would establish for the first time limits of 4 hours per day and 20 hours per week for 16 and 17-year-old workers while school is in session. It would require certificates of employment for all minors under the age of 18. It would provide protection for minors under the age of 14 who are migrant workers or seasonal agricultural workers. The bill has a number of other provisions, which is what the doctor was talking about. A lot of people don't realize that some of the ways farm workers get paid is paid upon what they pick, what they produce. So as children, before they go to school, in order to make ends meet, due to the financial situation in the family, they're out in the fields helping their family, before school, after school, on the weekends. It doesn't give the child an opportunity to a proper education to study. It takes away their childhood. Children should be able to play on the weekend. They should be free to explore their minds, and they can't do that constantly working in and out every single day. And without someone trying to bring this to our country's attention and getting these labor bills passed, it's going to continue on.
Now, those bills you read off, and you had mentioned for everyone to write to their governmental representatives, senators, congressmen. Would a phone call work? There are a lot of people out there who might get a little intimidated with not knowing how to write a letter and would rather, and much less time to make a phone call. Are phone calls recorded?
I don't know if they're recorded, but I'm sure.
What I mean is what they want. Can they call their different?
Yes.
And,
If
and
they
that
don't have
goes
the
into
time
the
to
record?
write, they don't
Call
have
the
the time to
congressman,
write, call
yeah.
the congressman. It's more effective if you write. Congressmen, we're their constituents. They're here to serve us. And if enough folks out of the area that they represent brings this to their attention, then they will bring it to the attention of the rest of their peers up in Congress, and hopefully these things will be passed.
The other thing that I think there is, Bill, that's not there is, so what do we do to reintegrate these young people back into society and education? It's a lot of damage done psychologically, physically, and even health-wise, and we have to look at programs to reintegrate them, and there has to be some funding to do that, especially in the third world countries, in our farm worker populations. Programs of rehabilitation, education, and development are something that's a high priority for us. There's not a lot been outlined, but one of the young speakers from India was outlining that in her country there are some rehabilitation centers where these young children that had been working in the rug carpet factories, and they were taken back for several months. They were rehabilitated and reintegrated back to their families or into society or into a training program. Many of these young people are left homeless after they've been separated from their families. So we have to address that, the proper rehabilitation and reintegration of these child laborers. If not, we're not going to break out of the cycle of poverty. It's going to continue with them and then their children. One of the big problems in third world countries, it's an acceptable norm that children work, and and maybe an economic necessity. So this is one of the ideas that we talked about earlier. If the child doesn't work, we give the job to the parent, so the economic unit stays intact. There's many strategies, but we have to find a formula to make them work in these third world countries as well as our own country.
I'm just amazed at the number of children in this country that are going through this. 250
million worldwide, they say, children that are in labor, forced labor. And these are kids from 4 years old on up. 250 million, it's a big number. And that's probably only the tip of the iceberg.
I'm sure it is, because everything is usually underestimated when it comes to something like this. Now, how long do you think it's going to take?
Well, hopefully there'll be enough attention brought in our country and other civilized countries that belong to the ILO. And when the convention at the end of May in Geneva and they do a new rights on a child, that our country will come on board, and it'll starting to address these issues. As a result of this legislation, or I want to say the Convention on the Rights of the Child, just that simple, basic rights that we believe that everyone should have. There's been sweeping legislation across some of the third world countries. And as a result of that, we believe we can change some of the laws for the good of our children, specifically the farm workers in our country. As stated, the key to this is having our country sign on to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And it also is to try to force this issue up at our legislative branches to ensure that our children in our country are safe.
I think, too, another thing that was brought out by some of the young organizers that came through, one leg was coming in from Brazil, the one that joined us in in Mexicali, and they'd been to Mexico, and they'd been to Panama, and they'd been to the Central and South American countries. In many cases, people just didn't understand what they were talking about. It was like, well, this doesn't really exist. I think that was the initial reception in Mexico, and then, you know, they went out to the universities and out to some of the other areas, and this press conference started to get the attention of the local officials in Mexico, who later followed them and went back and said, hey, we need to work together on this. So I think, as Jimbo said, this is an eye-opener for many countries. Many countries just have not thought about it or even identified it as a problem. So yeah, we do have a long way to go in education. If we have a problem in our country in not signing the ILO, I mean, think about third world countries that are, you know, very desperate situation economically, and every person in the family is almost, to them, necessary to work. And so the countries have to go through a lot of fundamental economic reforms as well. Not just say, well, the kids no longer can work, then nobody eats. I mean, you have to find a way of bringing the parents in, getting them more income, so that the loss of income of the child it does not ruin the rest of the family's health and well-being. So it's a very vicious cycle. It's been ingrown for many generations and probably for thousands of years of human history. And this is just a small attempt to try to break out of this terrible cycle of enslaving our children and robbing ourselves of our future generations.
Now, if we have viewers out there that have been watching the program and want to get some more information, or what can they do to help, or call to get those bills so they know what they're going to say when they call their representatives, would you each give us your phone numbers?
I can do one up on you. If
Great.
they want information on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, they can contact the U.S. Committee for UNICEF at area code 202-296-4242. Or they can write to 1775 K Street Northwest, Suite 360, Washington, D.C. 20006. And that will bring some more attention. And maybe the folks can call and get their church groups involved, their community groups involved, and try to put an end to this. And if you want some of these bills, they can contact my office at 751-9672. I'm located on Broadway here in Tucson, on Broadway Boulevard, and Dr. Arnold is on 46th Street.
806 East 46th Street, 622-3553. But I would certainly defer to the number that was given to you earlier by Jimbo, because I think they're the ones that are really carrying this on a national level. Those of us on the local level, it's a daily occurrence and a fight that we have to be vigilant about and make sure in our own backyard we're taking care of business. And then those that are working on the national scene have to do that, as well as the people in international. If we all do our job, we can at least minimize and at least turn the corner on this tragedy.
So what we're looking at here for our viewers is, if you have children, if you know children, think of them being put into this position. Think of them being 4 years old and having to work. Not playing at ironing clothes, or playing at cooking, or playing at doing dishes, but out in the fields or in the plants. Some chained right to the apparatus they're working on, and cannot get loose, do not have restroom breaks. Look at your child and think of your child in that position. Then write your congressman, write your senator. If you need any help, call me, call Jim, call John. Call the AFL-CIO. Go to the blue pages in your phone book. It will list all of the representatives. All you need to do is know where you live, and they'll hook you up with the right one and get you set. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. I think there are a lot of people out there that have just learned a lot of things they never heard before, and hopefully they'll do something about it. And I thank you for all your heart and your caring and your involvement. Without people like you, nothing gets accomplished. Thank you for being with us. Good night.